people, and welcome to week 7 of general psychology. Great job on the midterms. Now forget all of that info because it's going to be all new info for the final. This week is chapter 5 and chapter 9. Let's start with chapter 5. That is motivation and emotion. Quick overview of what we'll be talking about. We've got a few different theories of motivation. We've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've got some different theories of emotion. So theories of motivation, theories of emotion, and we're going to talk about expressing emotions. So what is motivation? Some researchers think that motivation is the main force behind behavior, more than learning or imitation or stimulus and response. So Miller described motivation as the study of all those pushes and prods, biological, social, and psychological, that defeat our laziness and move us either eagerly or reluctantly to action. So this would be a theory more closely followed by humanists or cognitive psychologists, those who see behavior as a result of something going on inside us. The book describes motive and a tendency to seek out good things and incentives. This is very specific and situational. The book does not have a good definition. Instead, we like this second arrow right here that says internal state that activates behavior and gives it direction. So that's a better definition of motivation. So in your first index card of the slideshow, you will be writing what is motivation. And on the back, motivation is the main force behind behavior. So we're going to talk about William James's theory of instinct. So instincts are innate impulses that direct behavior. This theory was proposed by William James, saying that we are born with these genetically predetermined impulses that evolved to help us survive and procreate. These instincts guide us and motivate our behaviors. This idea eventually fell out of favor for a couple of reasons. One, you're unable to determine whether something is ingrained, so if it's nature or if it's learned, which is nurture. And then there are really way too many instincts listed. James named 35 of them, but the list of instincts kept getting longer and longer. So this note card will be Instinct by William James, which sounds a lot like a cologne ad, like Obsession by Calvin Klein. On the back side, instincts equals innate impulses that direct behavior, and they are genetically predetermined. So this theory is the theory of drive reduction. So drive is an uncomfortable internal state. And the drive reduction theory states that we are constantly trying to reduce that uncomfortable state. So an example is when we have an inner conflict, such as seeing ourselves as smart, but then getting a bad grade. We strive to resolve this disagreement and figure out we are smart and just got unlucky, or we are actually dumb and the grade has just shown us the truth. The primary drive pushes us to maintain homeostasis, our biological needs like hunger and thirst. Our secondary drives push us to fulfill all needs not biological, like loneliness, for example. We as humans strive to connect. So these are often learned and differ based on each person. A drive for one person may not be a drive for another. But there are criticisms against this theory. We take actions that go beyond fulfilling needs, such as overeating. If there's no longer a biological need, then why do we continue? Why do we keep eating after our need has been met? We also take actions against the norm, such as thrill seekers, which is totally against the primary drive of survival. Sometimes secondary drives go against primary drives. All right, magical note card of fun is going to say drive reduction theory, which sounds like a cool name for a band. And on the back side, primary drives push us to maintain homeostasis or biological needs. All right, this is the theory of arousal. So this theory states that we strive toward an optimal level of arousal to maintain the best performance we can. If we are under-aroused, we will do something to increase it, and vice versa. Every person is different. Remember drive, where our secondary drives vary by person. Arousal is the same thing. So this is why some people are happy at home with a kitty and a cup of tea, and others want adventure and want to see the world. All right, index card will say arousal. In the back side says levels are individualized. In other words, not all people have the same level of arousal. One of the last theories is that we are motivated by incentives, which is often the case. So an incentive is a pursuit of a goal or desire we want to fulfill. Now there are two types of motivations in this. The first one is extrinsic motivation. So that means we are pushed toward a behavior by something outside of us. So for example, usually, and this is going to be true in your adult life, a paycheck is an extrinsic motivator. Gold stars for good grades, reward money for turning in a wallet, whatever, right? And then the next type is intrinsic. So intrinsic motivation means that we are pushed to behave in a way by something inside of us. So an example would be feeling good about doing the right thing or feeling accomplished when reaching a goal. Intrinsic often sticks better. The other way is a little bit more like bribery. You want someone to want something themselves to make it stick. Especially as a teacher, we prefer that people are intrinsically motivated to do their homework because they know it's the right thing, instead of an extrinsic motivation, which would involve stuff that's outside of our control. Alrighty, so this one is incentive, and on the back side is a pursuit of goal or desire we want to fulfill. Now we're going to talk about Maslow and his hierarchy of needs. So Abraham Maslow thought that certain needs take priority over others. He theorized we would seek physical basic need fulfillment first. Then we would seek to meet psychological needs, and lastly, if we could achieve all that, then we would seek self-actualization or the motivation to reach our full potential. He thought that many never reach self-actualization. We spend too much time trying to fulfill all the needs below it. However, how often do you skip a step and fulfill something higher? For example, choosing a part-time job you think you'll love over a full-time job that will pay the bills. So you jump to your esteem needs over your physiological needs. I bet you can't guess what we're going to write on this one, guys. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're only going to really talk about two of them, however. And those are the basic needs. So safety, which is security and safety, and then the physiological needs, which is food, water, warmth, rest, etc. All right, now we're moving on to emotions. So emotion is a complex reaction to an event that involves physiological reactions, behavioral reactions, facial expressions, cognition, and affective responses. So think of a situation that brings up an emotion. How do all these things fit in? Often externally driven, in that something outside of us acts as the stimulus. So like a movie or a conversation or something like an event, there's usually a cause for an emotion. One emotion can be caused by many things. So this is much less specific than motivation. All right, the James Lange theory of emotion. This theory is that emotion is purely physical. What we see in body response is the actual emotion. Walter Cannon disagreed with this. So many emotions have the same responses. Anger and fear, for example, share characteristics in physical response. So if that's all it is, how can you distinguish between them? So think about like a racing heartbeat for anger and for fear and for love. So how if you're only looking at that racing heartbeat, how can you tell what it is for if it's only about the physical? You need more information than that. So the physiological response often comes after you recognize an emotion is happening. So how can this happen if we know that an emotion is just physical? If you create the same physiological response, it doesn't cause an emotion. All right, remember folks, this was the James Lange theory of emotion. And the backside, emotion is purely physiological. All right, so Cannon and Bard took the criticism for James Lange and made their own theory. They thought that stimulus comes in and the brain interprets that and creates an emotion, and the physiological response comes from that. Then we have the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion. So the two-factor theory explains how the two together create an emotion. The two being, of course, physiological and emotional, right? So this theory is very similar to Bard Cannon, who saw that the brain must play a part. So this theory expands on that. We have arousal symptoms, and many may be shared by many emotions. We interpret them then into a category of fear, joy, anger, whatever it might be. based on the context of the situation. We use what's around us to decide what that arousal is meant to stimulate. So the criticism is that we can feel emotion without physiological arousal. There are drugs to block the autonomic nervous system arousal, and people still reported feeling emotions and interpreted them. All right, on this note card, on this next one rather, this is the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion. And that is physiological arousal and cognitive interpretation of that arousal. All right, now let's talk about Lazarus. Lazarus developed from the two-factor and left out arousal portion, since we know it's not necessary, especially after the criticism of the last one. He said, we saw a situation, interpreted it, and that determines the emotion felt. Everyone is different and can see the same situation and respond to it differently. Some critics say that you can feel something without thinking about it. They say this because they showed people Japanese symbols and asked them how they felt about it. People liked the ones they saw more often, even though they didn't know what they meant. So where is the brain playing a part in interpreting there? This one will be Lazarus and his cognitive mediational theory of emotion. And on the backside, initial interpretation of situation determines following emotion. All right, now let's talk about expressing ourselves. So, Paul Ekman is the leading researcher for facial expressions. Who knew there was such a thing? He traveled the world and found that some emotions are universal. Everyone expresses certain things in the same way. These are anger, happiness, fear, and sadness. However, there are some differences across cultures. So faces might have accents, so to speak, the same way that our voices do. Micro expressions are not explained in the book, but they're still interesting. So think about, I don't know if any of you have ever watched the TV show Lie to Me. I never have. But it's based on the real Dr. Ekman, and he studies micro expressions to, I believe, solve crimes. All right. On this index card, we will write expressing emotion. And on the back side, some emotions are more universal than others. Oh, look at that. It's the last slide for this presentation. Hooray! And we are all done with this particular chapter. There's still another chapter to do. However, if you have questions, please make sure you email and ask them before you answer something on a test that you're sure you know, but you don't really know. All right, I'll see you in like 2 seconds with the other video.